It's Song Talk Radio.
Welcome to Song Talk Radio and Happy New Year to all our listeners.
Happy New Year.
It's now 2023, and this is still the show with songwriters talking to other songwriters about the craft of songwriting. We share tips, tools, and techniques, and together we all become better at writing songs. I'm your host, Neel Modi, and with me, my co-host, Phil Emery. Happy New Year, Phil. How are you?
Happy New Year. I'm doing fantastic here in St. John's, Newfoundland. It's actually some snow on the ground. We've had a very green winter, Christmas and holiday season. So
During Christmas. Okay. Excellent. Yeah, we've had rain here lately. It's been mild.
Yeah.
And meantime, please send your comments, questions, weather reports, anything else you think of to @SongTalkRadio on Twitter, Facebook, or Instagram. Feedback at songtalk.ca for the email, and we'll share your thoughts on the show. And please visit songtalk.ca to see the show post for this episode and to find links to resources and other things that we mention. And tonight is just in the family. Brothers from different mothers in the room today. And so there's certainly no guest tonight, but we're just here to launch the new year in a soft way, get us rolling into 2023. And of course, the one of the things we're looking forward to over the next couple of months is going to be our next songwriting challenge. And of course, we've enjoyed it over the last few years, and we really enjoyed the fact that our listeners have been contributing and taking part and sending us their answers to our songwriting challenges. So we were hoping to do it again this year. And this year, of course, if you've been on the podcast for the last little while, you know that we're going to be talking about modes. And the challenge is going to be to write a song in a mode that you don't normally write in, or an unusual mode. However, you like to do that. And it's just a way to explore a little bit of music theory that we're guessing a lot of our listeners are not, intimately familiar with, and hopefully we can put some, help you put some intention behind writing in a mode, because like we've been saying, like most of us have done it by accident from time to time, but to actually do it deliberately maybe puts another tool into your toolbox for the new year.
it's hard to make use of that kind of a tool, because at first you're going to be a little bit sort of awkward with it. And I think as songwriters, we tend to sort of do what feels natural and what we've already known how to do. So it's hard to do something like that, because I think if you try writing in a mode, you're not used to writing in a mode, you'll kind of work for a bit and then you'll go, oh, this is too hard. And then you'll kind of abandon it. Having a challenge will kind of force you to complete it. And again, it won't be may not be the best song you've ever written, but you'll learn a lot at the end.
That's a really good point, because it's something that, especially with something like this, that's very theoretical, or can be very theoretical. And you go into it going, oh, this is way too cerebral. I'm thinking too much about this. But you're right. When you're presented with the challenge, you have to finish it.
Yes.
And see it through to completion. And that's actually one of the attractions about challenges of any kind, that we've done over the years, or that other people have put out, is that you actually see something through to the end. Which a lot of us have challenges starting songs. I always have a challenge starting a song. I never have a challenge finishing a song. I know you're the opposite, Phil. You can always start a song, but you can never finish them.
I have so many songs started. It's, I think, maybe 100 in my folder. It's a terrible thing, because not finishing something in some ways it makes it almost not worth starting, because you're just kind of flapping about. But not having a deadline helps. Neel, I have just had a question for you. Over the holidays, did you buy yourself any musical stuff, any musical toys?
Over the holidays, no. Because I was out of town for most of the holidays, so we were enjoying a little time away, and didn't spend a lot of time in the studio. But certainly when last week or so, I discovered a new toy for my studio.
What toy is that?
So I wasn't even necessarily looking for this, but I just happened to see it on social media or something. It was a sponsored post. I never click on sponsored posts, but it seemed intriguing because it's essentially a plugin or a piece of software called Dreamtonic Synthesizer V, and it's a virtual singer, and you feed it your melody as a MIDI track, and you feed it your lyrics, and it sings for you. And
That's so cool.
and it sounds pretty natural. I mean, you do have to put some work into sort of dynamics and making sure that, you know, notes that swell, because by default it's not going to do any of this. You know, it's not going to, you know, put words that have a little less tension, a little more aggressiveness, a little more whatever. So you got to, you know, bring that level of the emotion to the song. But luckily the software has settings for all of this stuff, and you can automate it all, and you can be as detailed as you want with it, and really bring, you know, a performance together. You can even adjust the timing if something seems too perfectly timed, because obviously it's a computer
Oh, right.
thing.
Yeah.
Right. So there's all sorts of things you can do to sort of quote unquote humanize it. But you know, but the voices are pretty amazing. They do have, you know, you buy the software package, then you have to buy each voice bank separately. So and it's a Japanese company, so a lot of the voices are Asian, they're Chinese, or they're Korean, or they're Japanese. There are a few English ones, but I think even the Asian voice banks, they also have English versions of those. It just, I guess they're accented with like a Japanese accent, singing the Japanese singer singing in English, so it might have a bit of an accent.
Cool, actually.
Which is kind of neat. And I'll be honest, since I bought this thing and since I uploaded a song to my YouTube channel, I've been seeing all sorts of people doing cover songs with this software. There was one that you probably like this one, Phil. There was one person who uploaded Yazoo, Only You.
Wow.
That's a song from the 80s, had this software singing it. It's pretty good, actually. It's not bad. Another one I saw that should Do You Hear the People Sing from Les Mis, with like 7 different voices.
Holy smokes. So
Stuff, which was pretty cool.
so you type in the word you want it to sing.
Yeah, you basically type in your lyrics. You can literally copy and paste your lyrics. Like I did it like sort of phrase by phrase, and then there's certain, you know, syntax things you can do to make a note a syllable span over multiple notes, or
Right.
you know, insert a breath, or what. There's all these little tools for doing these things, and that sort of thing. So you can do basically anything, legato it, staccato it, whatever you want to do.
That's cool. Is it expensive?
It wasn't too bad. It was like I think the bundle I got with one of the female English voices and the software was like $150 US.
That's not bad.
Which is not too bad, considering, you know, we've talked on the show whenever we talk about home recording and stuff, where you don't need another plugin.
Yes.
You know, especially when you've got a plethora of stuff already. The last thing I need is another EQ, another compressor, another saturation plug. My God, I've got so many of them, right? But this is literally something I have nothing like this, anything close to this. I have some choir plugins that do oohs and ahs and things, but nothing that does quite anything like this. And since then, I have learned there are other softwares out there that do this. There's one called M-Voice. There's a couple of other companies that have been doing this sort of AI driven, sample based, you know, virtual singer thing. And quite frankly, I think I still feel like the one that I got is the best of the bunch. Like, it sounds the most natural. The other ones seem to be very much tied to like electronic music. So they do have that sort of auto-tune quality to them from the samples that I heard and stuff. But this one you can do that if you want, but you've got the manipulation and the detailed editor that you can kind of do anything. And, you know, vibrato, you can customize the vibrato for each individual note if you want to. It's like, you know, you can go really, really fine tune on this thing.
That's really cool. Are you able to change the timbre of the voice, like make it less husky or more husky?
Yeah, you can. There is this slider, and it's an automation thing as well, called tension, that makes, like, when you increase a tension, it sounds more sort of nasally, more head voice. And then if you slide it the other way, then it becomes a little bit mellower, a little bit chest voice. kind of thing.
Very cool.
And as well, there's like a breathiness thing, so you can make a voice breathier or less breathy, and even to the level of the individual phonemes. So if you've got say your name Emery, you got M, and E, and
Right.
you can adjust the duration and the emphasis of each of those individual little syllables, the
Oh,
little
wow.
phonemes they call them, right? So if the singer's hitting the T a little too hard or the R a little too hard, you can just reduce it, no problem, and
Oh,
then
fun.
they'll focus more on the vowel, right? It's like you can like, the detail level of this thing is ridiculous. Like I went through it and a little 2-minute song that I wrote just before the holidays, my holiday song for the year, very quick and dirty, and I went through it and I kept thinking to myself, my God, you could spend literally hours
Oh, yeah.
like just tweaking every single little phrase. Like I went through it like fairly quickly, but even then I spent some time on it. It's all the things that you take for granted if you sing or if you record a singer, and all the nuances and things that they're doing, you have to dial all that in manually.
Yeah. Makes you really appreciate
Right.
what
And,
they
and and
do.
and it does make you appreciate all the things that you take for granted that
Yeah.
singers do.
Yeah. I mean, it probably is easier to get a vocalist in your home studio if you know of one, but not everyone does, you
Yeah,
know?
and quite frankly, this was easy for me. I mean, I paid the bucks
Yeah.
for it, but then I could just do it in my spare time with my headphones on and kind of, you know, and just do, instead of bringing someone here and setting them up and miking them and
Yeah. No,
then,
it's
oh, can you
true.
sing it like this instead? Can you sing it like that instead? Whatever,
Yeah.
that sort of thing, or and really the impetus for this was I did my holiday song before the holidays, very quick and dirty, and I wanted to do it. I wanted to get it out on my
Before.
YouTube channel at least,
Yeah.
whatever, before we went away for the holidays, right? So I did it in like 2 days. I wrote the thing and recorded it in like 2 days,
That's
and
great.
I wasn't entirely happy with my vocal performance. So like, I finally had a better singer to do this for me. Hey, wait a minute,
Hey, that's really fun. Good
I've got a
vocal
plugin now
plugins
that'll
like
do it.
that are expensive. I know I was looking for a plugin that would just do oohs and ahs, like a few people standing around a microphone going ooh. And there's tons and tons of choir
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
plugins. And there's very few that actually just have like 2 or 3 people around a microphone. I'm not sure if that's a rights or a royalty issue or what it is, but there's a couple of ones I found, but they were like $200.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're doing stuff for a hobby, you start going, well,
Yeah.
is this for a background thing? Do I really need it? So I was actually able to throw something together from an old sampler disc I had for my old Emu sampler, and they
Right.
actually
Right.
had Emu, like people doing that. So that sounded okay. So,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
it's
Because
yeah,
I was just about to say that probably sample packs would be the better way to go for that sort of vocal. Because like you say, like a choir vocal, like there's lots. I have one that's really good actually.
yeah.
But it is very choir-ish. It's very classical choir. It's not Motown. It's not
No, yeah, which is what I was looking for.
that
Yeah,
kind of flavor. But there's lots of sample packs that do that stuff, and you got to drop them in. You got to tune them
yeah,
and whatever, and you can even develop your own harmonies and things like that. But it's you gotta put in the legwork on that,
yeah.
as
So,
opposed to just a nice plugin where you can just play a chord on your keyboard and boom.
how well does it do the oohs and ahs?
The one that I got.
Yeah,
I haven't actually tried Oohs and Ahs, but but if it pronounces vowels okay, then it could probably do Oohs and Ahs just as well.
yeah. Oh, interesting.
And again, you can go in and adjust the phonemes if it's not to your particular liking. Like, you
Very
can put a little
cool.
more H in it, put a little less H in it, whatever.
Yeah. Well,
It's
that's
pretty
a
good.
yeah. It sounds
And
like
the other thing
fun.
about like this is like an AI driven, you think it's a heavy duty plugin, but it loads up, like the standalone version loads up faster than like Microsoft Word. It loads up
Really?
faster than, photo editing program, loads up way faster than my Cakewalk DAW program. It loads up like so fast. And when you adjust something, it adjusts the waveforms like almost in real time. It just takes like half a second.
Hmm.
It's a pretty efficient software. Like it's very, very low on the CPU and everything. So considering how powerful it is,
That's
Seems
amazing.
to seems to run pretty quick.
Huh. Well, there you go. So I guess it means that Facebook advertising works.
I guess so. And you know what? I mean, this thought occurred to me like years ago. Like everyone's all crazy about like they're spying on me and they're tracking all my data and stuff like that. But since then, I've received advertising that's actually relevant to me.
I'm the same way. I mean, I
You
work
know, like
in
I
marketing, you know?
I don't mind it. Like they send me stuff that I'm actually going to buy, not stuff that's completely irrelevant. If there is something irrelevant, you can actually turn it off and say I
Yeah,
don't want to see this ad anymore, and that's pretty much it.
I'm the
But
same way. I work in marketing and having people know the stuff I want to buy, that it's great because I want to buy more stuff like what I want to buy, and sure, people can show me more ads on guitars and basses and stuff. That's awesome. That's what when
mhm,
you buy a magazine, it's filled with ads for stuff you usually want to buy. If you buy Guitar Player magazine or Future Music magazine or
yeah.
whatever is left of the magazine world, um, they're filled with product specific ads. So why
Mhm.
not?
Why not? I don't mind it. And
Yeah.
yeah, sure, they're tracking me, and they algorithms probably know more about my preferences and things than even I do. But
Oh
hey,
yeah. I have friends who are worried about that. I always tell them, look, we lost the privacy wars decades ago. It's done.
it's done. Yeah. Yeah. Still waiting for the Minority Report thing where you walk into a store and they scan your eyes and
That's true.
and then start just sending you ads.
The thing that I bought myself over the holidays is
Mhm.
there's a service called Plugin Alliance, and they market a
Oh yeah.
whole bunch of different plugins. And then they
Yep.
had a subscription, like it's $9 a month or something, and
Mhm.
you get to use basically all their plugins.
Nice.
And they have quite a few. And I figured, well, I'd give it a shot. I actually had bought a couple of the ones off Plugin Alliance. They're quite good, and
Mhm.
it's actually worked out very well because I can try all of them. I didn't load them all because, of course, there's hundreds. But
Mhm.
I've tried stuff that I normally wouldn't have bothered purchasing
Mhm.
because you're going, well, I don't really need it, or I don't really know what it does, or and it's been really good. I've found a whole bunch of new plugins that have been very useful. But the one I wanted to tell people who happen to be doing home recording, and it's important when you're mixing to get to a final mix, is that you have a reference track. And usually that's a
Mhm.
track that is somewhat the same in tone or in style as what you're working on. And that'll help you get your the sound of in the levels of your bass and your drums and guitars and what have you. And there's this plugin that I just love. It's amazing. It's called I don't even know how you pronounce this name. It's ADPTR. So I'm not sure if it's adapter or adapter audio.
Adapter. Oh yeah. I feel like I've seen that somewhere. Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
called Metric AB,
Mhm.
and it allows you to you put on your mix bus, and then you can load up a whole bunch of different reference tracks. It'll match all the tracks to the same volume as your mix master, like
Mhm.
your the track that you're working on. And it also has these amazing things. It has a spectrum, so you can sort of see how your reference track is reflected in frequency at the same time as
Mhm.
your track. So you can sort of see, oh, I like the sound of this, but wow, my high end was like much higher than my reference track. And
Mhm.
little things like that. It gives you the spectrum. It gives you how the phase sits, in comparison to your reference track. And another great
Mhm.
thing is that it allows you to just sort of listen to the low end of your
Mhm.
mix and to the low end of the reference mix, and you can
Mhm.
A B between them with a click of the button, which is
Nice.
quite nice, and also with like the mid range and then the high range
Mhm.
and the high end. So it allows you to sort of listen to things in isolation, and it's really great.
That's
Um,
cool.
so
Yeah,
it's
that sounds very
yeah,
handy. It seems like a
it's
lot of these plugins nowadays, they especially when you've got a lot of stuff already, and it's
yeah,
like you say, it's not something you really need, right? But it just does what you could already have done, but just makes it easier to do.
Yes, exactly.
Right.
So
You could easily have done all this stuff with soloing tracks and
which is
putting,
what I've done
you
before.
know, putting band filters on everything and
Yeah.
sort of doing it all manually. But this, if you could just do it with a click of a button, okay.
Yeah. And I
makes
find I'm
makes your life
being
easy.
a lot more. So
Yeah.
it's
Use it a lot more.
so it's not cheap. It's $199
Mm.
US. But if you,
Mm.
with a bundle I have at the end of the year, you get to choose 4 um, plugins to
Okay.
keep. You still get to use them
Mhm.
all, but I guess you get licensed 4. So this will definitely be one of the ones
Mm.
that I keep because I use this all the time. It's been really good. So
Mm. That's
it's a
cool. Yeah,
plugin
that's awesome.
alliance, plugin-alliance.com.
Yeah, for sure. We'll put a link to that in the show post because yeah, I have a few plugin alliance plugins. I feel like they're ones I just happen to get for free from like
Yeah.
Black Friday deals or holiday gifts or whatever. But I think I feel like I've spent a few bucks on plugin alliance at some point or another. But yeah, they have some good stuff. Some really
And
good
if you
stuff.
sign up with them, they're always giving you like $25 off or $50 off or,
No, I'm sure.
like
Yeah.
literally every week you're getting something. So a very
Cool.
handy tool.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Awesome. Alrighty. Yeah, so one of the things I've been excited about the last week or so is that Peter Gabriel is releasing a new album. He hasn't released an album since 2002 of original music. He's done
Wow.
some other musical projects, but it's been like 20 years. And he's put his first track on Bandcamp of all places, which surprised me a little bit. So I thought Bandcamp was like more for indie artists or
Yeah.
whatever. Like I don't really see. Although Tears for Fears when they released their album last year, I'm pretty sure I bought their album on Bandcamp,
I wonder if
which is
they're doing that
interesting.
as a
But
way of getting around label royalties or something.
I, I don't know. It's still. I mean, the Peter Gabriel track. It still says by Real World Studios or whatever it's called.
Yeah. That's his
His
label. So
that is his label. So I guess it's different with him because he owns his own label. But
hmm.
yeah, but it really got me thinking about this whole nostalgia factor that's been taking
Hmm.
place over. I mean, it's been like years now that like everything, like a lot of the music that I like tends to harken back to the 80s or the
Yeah.
90s or whatever, and even especially in TV and film, like in whatever Hollywood's cranking out these days tends to be a remake or has it been going on for
Yeah.
years, like a remake or a thing like a sequel a reboot or whatever of all these old franchises. And I don't know if we just happen to be the target age that all the stuff that we grew up, they're the people in positions where they can make the content now, and they're like, we don't have anything new to offer. Let's just go back and redo Karate Kid because why not?
Well, that's true. Well, of course, that's because it's also there's less of a chance of it flubbing because you know it worked once. Although
Yeah.
I don't know many reboots that have been better than the original, but I could be wrong.
Hmm. Yeah, I can't think of one offhand. I can think of a bunch of ones that are worse, but
Yeah. Now, how is the Peter Gabriel track?
it's pretty good. It sounds like something he would have done in the 90s. And he's got his dream team band. He's got Tony Levin on bass, he's got David Rhodes on guitar, and he's got Manu Katché, who's incredible drummer.
Yeah.
I mean, those guys are all. I mean, Tony Levin's not a slouch at,
Yeah.
but yeah, but he's got his dream team from the 90s playing on the track again. So the production wise and everything, and of course Brian Eno's on there playing some synthesizer electronic stuff,
Oh,
and
cool.
yeah, it's a pretty good track. He's got. I know he tried. He explained in his Bandcamp description of what the lyric is based on. It's like these I don't know if they're activist groups or whatever, but like some kind of the whole thing is about climate change essentially and how we're killing the
Hmm.
planet. But he's sort of tied that into how the planet gives data, and there's enormous amounts of data. Something about data and climate
Okay.
going together. So you could always leave it to Peter Gabriel to over intellectualize something.
No, of course he's
Yeah. But if I find myself excited for. I was really excited for last year's when Tears for Fears dropped an album. That was like my favorite album last year. It was
yeah, well,
incredible.
that
It was a
was
really really solid
yeah.
album.
And that's always the danger sometimes is, I don't know if sometimes there'll be like a reboot, or they'll bring back an old series that you loved, and like it's almost never good. Like it's never, mostly it's just like,
Mhm.
oh, don't do that. It was, um but
Yeah.
the fact that, I mean, that Tears for Fears was so strong. That was amazing. I don't know many bands that have made a comeback and had that kind of quality. Maybe there has, but I'm not aware of
Mhm.
them.
Yeah, quite
Um,
possible. But and to be honest, I was never a huge Tears for Fears fan. I always had like I always had the greatest hits CD.
yeah,
I never had a copy of the big, what was it, the big chair, big rocking chair, whatever it is.
yeah,
um, Whatever, right? So I always liked them. And then when I got older, and I remember hearing them on the radio when it was in the 80s, when I was a kid in the 80s, but when I got older, I appreciated them more for what I did hear. But then
yeah.
when I hear they come a new album, oh, let me check that out. And I was just like, holy cow. It's like solid songwriting and great production and everything about it. It was just, and it was like 17 years, I think, before since they last released anything,
Wow. So
just
yeah, it
incredible.
just shows no matter what stage you are at in your music career, you can always put out some new stuff.
Hmm.
So no,
Hmm.
that's really good. Of course, we
Yeah.
had
And yeah, speaking of legacy acts, we had a couple of artists pass away in the very recent past. Jeff Beck,
hmm,
just a couple days ago now.
yeah.
I was never that familiar with Jeff Beck, and it wasn't until we started doing this podcast, honestly, and I started going to the meetup group and things like that. People started talking about Jeff Beck as this artist, and I'll admit, for the first while, I thought people were talking about Beck, the artist Beck, and I didn't know who this guy Jeff Beck was. And then I found out later on, I found out that he was a world-renowned guitarist, and Yardbirds, which I never really came onto my radar, a little bit before my time, I think. And
Mhm.
yeah, but I don't know, but you must be more familiar with him, being a guitar guy too.
A little bit. I kind of quickly grew out of the sort of guitar god thing fairly early as a teenager,
Mm, okay.
and kind of got into weird European art rock, which of course made me very popular in high school, as it
Oh
would.
yeah, the girls must have loved you.
Oh, definitely. I was just some of them even looked at me, and that was pretty special at the time. But
Look at you, weird is what they.
yeah, I mean, Jeff Beck was certainly a master of the instrument and really pushed it in lots of
Mm,
different ways. And never let it go to his head. He always seemed to be kind of a very straightforward, together musician. And a lot of people from that world, overdosed or burnt out, and he managed to
mm.
like he's been playing up till very recently, I believe. So
Yeah. I
yeah.
watched the Rick Beato on YouTube. Got one of his buddies, Tim Peterson, like that, on his, and they did a live episode just the other day, yesterday. And it was like 20 minutes long, but they were just talking about him and how they recently saw him in concert, and Rick Beato had met him a couple times, and yeah, it was just that he kind of the thing that occurred to me just listening to that is that and maybe that's why I never heard of him, or I never wasn't really familiar with him, was because he was very much a musician's musician. Like
Yeah.
he wasn't the kind of guy that they were even saying he wasn't. He didn't. He had the Yardbirds at the time, but once the Yardbirds, he was no longer with the Yardbirds. He kind of went on his own thing. He wasn't like the Edge, who had U2. He
Yeah.
wasn't like
Slash or something.
Jimmy Page, who had Led Zeppelin to
Zeppelin, yeah. Or
as such, right?
Slash
So
with
he
Guns N'
didn't really have
Roses,
that,
or
but
yeah.
yeah, Slash with Guns N' Roses, whatever, right? So he didn't really have that kind of, he wasn't associated with a band necessarily, but what that enabled him to do was to explore all these different areas. Like he played
Yeah.
jazz, he played rock, he played folk, he did all these interesting experimental different things. A little bit like, it reminds me of Stuart Copeland, how he, once the Police disbanded, Stuart Copeland kind of went off and did, film and jazz and like all of these different
That's true.
sorts of avenues because he really just charted his own path, which is very commendable. You know, that's kind of an amazing thing.
Yeah, yeah, no, and I don't think he never chased fame. He just kind of did what he did. And I always respect people
Mm.
who do that because it's there's so, like
Yeah,
I've met
yeah,
so
for
many
sure.
people who desperately want to be famous, and he just wanted to play guitar. And I think
Hmm.
that is so great as opposed to some people who just want to be famous,
Yeah,
you
yeah,
know.
and especially to have that level of skill with the instrument. Like I feel like we don't really see that anymore. At least not in mainstream popular culture. They're out there, I'm certain,
Yeah,
but
well, of course, I
it's
don't
not.
think today's music is very well. Certainly, today's music is not very guitar driven.
Mm,
Now, maybe at some point it will be again as kids grow up and don't want to play the music that their parents played. So
mm,
maybe all the people who grew up listening to Kanye West and stuff like that, their kids are going to be listening to, wanting to do something. Maybe it'll be more guitar driven and more,
yeah,
musician wise. But um, yeah, it's really not as much in the forefront as it was before.
no,
But
no, certainly not.
yeah,
Like you say, that whole guitar god thing from that's kind of a generation ago at this point now.
yeah,
You
and I
think of
always
many
found
guitar
that
gods
kind of
from the
annoying.
recent, I don't know.
Yeah. But well, all my favorite guitarists are all weird guys like Mark Moreland from Wall of Voodoo, who passed
Mm,
away, and of course, guitarist from the B-52s who has passed away. So, kind
mhm,
of dragging and talking about people who have passed away is one of my heroes, which is Terry Hall. Of course,
mm,
he was the lead singer for the Specials, and of course, the
mhm,
Specials were one of the first sort of integrated ska bands in the UK, 1977 period.
mhm,
And of course, there was a lot of racial tensions and a lot of riots in the UK
mm.
at the time. So the fact that they were an integrated band was a big deal. And a great, I loved his delivery. He wasn't like a crooner as a
Mhm.
vocalist. He had a real distinctive style and sounded very British. And of course, he was in Fun Boy 3 and The Color Field, had a bunch of hits. And he actually had a brief history with one of the Go Go's. And
Right.
his letter that he wrote to his girlfriend at the time in the Go Go's, came out to be Our Lips Are Sealed, which is one of my
Yeah.
favorite Go-Go's songs. Of course, we had
It's a
Kathy,
great Coco song.
yes, and we had Kathy Ballantyne on the Go-Go's back a little while ago. And
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, so I was very surprised because he wasn't terribly old, and they were about to go on another tour, but he had some
Oh, really,
stomach,
really? Okay.
yeah, he had some stomach issues, and then he found out that he had stomach cancer.
Oh,
And
yeah.
pancreatic cancer,
Oh, pancreatic
and
cancer. Wow. Jeez.
yeah, because he just sort of thought he had they're about to go on tour, and he said, "Oh, we'll have to put it off for a week. I've got something wrong with my stomach." And then
Mm,
the next time he was in the hospital, and it went down very quickly. So
wow.
yeah, very much a drag. I mean, I really love the Specials and Fun Boy
Mm,
3 and his whole approach, and you know, it's a drag when your heroes that you grew up with start passing away. But I guess this,
yeah, yeah.
I have heard that people do pass away in ranges. Like a bunch of people will pass away in their 50s, and then their 70s and their 90s. There's sort of these periods where people tend
Mm.
to. So so make sure you get a lot of exercise out there and eat properly because
Eat well, kids,
that's
and
true.
get your steps in.
And you have to, because you have to finish off those songs.
Yes, exactly. Well, things you want to do before your time is up.
Yes,
Make
yes.
sure you finish all that catalog of songs you have, Phil, that you never finished. You gotta
I
get
shall live
through those.
forever.
Oh geez. And speaking about things that last a long time, you were talking about it's something you mentioned on the show a number of times is the lengths of songs. What's your latest thought on that?
Well, yeah, because I'm always, I think it's an interesting thing when you get into songwriting the way we do and the way our listeners do in terms of it, not just something that you do, but it's a craft and it's something that you consider and you intellectualize and you think about and analyze up the wazoo.
Mm-hmm.
That sometimes we can kind of get into it too much. And I've been very worried about song lengths because, of course, song lengths have been getting shorter because of TikTok and so on. But over the holidays, we've been watching a movie. We watch a movie every year, and there's a bunch of holidays movies we watch every year. One of them is for me is The Christmas Story because I really enjoyed that, and another one is that Heather really enjoyed is Love Actually. And the first time I saw it, I didn't like it. It seemed to have seemed to be about, as far as I could tell, 30 or 40 different people and 30 and 40 different stories. And it was just kind of like, I don't know. But she enjoys it and she watched it. But then I noticed when we watched it the next year, is I actually liked it a little bit. And every year that we've watched it, I've liked it a little more. And I was sort of thinking, that's kind of odd because there's not a lot of things I like to watch over and over again. But then I realized if you're going to watch a movie once, having the story of like one couple or maybe two at the max is really enjoyable because you can follow it and you get into it. With when you watch something the first time, and I think there's 4 couples, there's stories that are involved in this, maybe 5, I don't know. It's too much, and you don't really know anyone, so it just kind of washes over you. But every time you see it, you become a little bit more familiar with all these players in this story, so you can sort of get all these subtleties that you wouldn't normally get off of watching it the first time. And then I was thinking about, song lengths, and there's lots of songs that I listen to, and they're 3 minutes long, but maybe having a longer work makes it much more interesting on repeated listenings because it has more stuff in it as opposed to something that's just kind of here and gone. Like some of the stuff in the 70s was quite long. The Fleetwood Mac stuff could be, a bit on the lengthy side. Supertramp stuff was often very long. Yeah. And you actually played me this one song called Under the Pressure, I think, from a band
Under the
called,
Pressure.
The War on Drugs.
The War on Drugs, which was released in 2014.
And it is 8 minutes and 52 seconds.
Yeah.
And it's a really interesting song, and it has lots of stuff to listen to, and I can understand.
Yeah.
Like it takes you on a journey. So, maybe we shouldn't worry about the length of the songs and to just make sure that the songs are not boring if you're going to do something long. And their song is not boring because they have lots of stuff in that song. I wonder how they actually wrote it because it sounds like it's almost a jam, but.
Yeah, it kind of feels like a jam. But here's the other difference too, is that the long songs in the 70s, they had, especially with the progressive rock and stuff like that Supertramp started out as, eventually ended up more in pop, and same thing with Genesis, quite frankly, they ended up in pop. But when they started out, things were like multiple different sections. So the 7-minute song, even something like Stairway to Heaven or Bohemian Rhapsody, those are songs that have multiple. They're like it's like a mini suite of stuff in a classical sense, right? It's different. It's varying different sections. This under the Pressure song is essentially the same sort of mood and same sort of part the whole way through. It's just it's the building up of layers and introducing different melodies and vocal coming in and vocal coming out and instrumental bits and it's really an arrangement thing. Like you could do a 3.5 minute version of this song and you'll lose some richness from the extended version for sure, but in terms of content, you're not really going to miss anything, if you know what I mean. Like
Yeah.
it could work. Whereas if you did a 3 minute edit of Stairway to Heaven, you'd have a much harder time trying to pick what 3 minutes are going to go in there.
That is
you know,
true.
you know what I mean. But I think you're absolutely right. You don't have to worry about it so much anymore. The only thing is the skip factor on notably Spotify, but all the streaming services, that
Yeah.
doesn't count as a play unless if it's skipped within the first 30 seconds. So people want to get their hooks and things, and people ingrained right away. And this, like this song takes a minute and a half before the vocal comes in. And it's just a
Yeah.
buildup of tone and texture for a long time. I don't know how popular it was. I found it just because I found it on Spotify. However, people find things on Spotify. But the other thing to consider too is the role of technology in all of this, right? Because like when records first came out, recordings had to be a certain length, especially if you wanted to get a number of songs on an LP. You were limited to 45 minutes or 22 minutes aside, and so they had to be a certain kind of length, to sort of fit within that structure or whatever. And then same thing with when CDs came along, people started doing 80-minute albums.
Yes, and they
like
shouldn't have
15 songs on them, and some of them were good and a lot of them was just a lot of filler, right?
Yeah.
But now we're in the world of streaming, and I don't know, like if you're uploading to Spotify, do they put a cap on how long your track it can be at all?
No idea.
I don't know. If you tried uploading a track that's 6 hours long, could you get away with it? YouTube, certainly you can upload hours worth of a video. If that's one song, then that's one song.
Yeah, I guess that's true, isn't it?
Right. There's ostensibly there's no limit now to the length of a song from a technological media standpoint, unless you're planning on releasing on CD or vinyl. If you're just releasing electronically on streaming, it don't really matter. And if you have people, that are going to listen to your music, no longer how long it takes to build up. And we talk about this on podcasts all the time. We appreciate it when songwriters come in and actually sort of let the song steep and let it evolve and let it take its time a little bit.
Yeah.
And sometimes that ends up being a 4-minute, 5-minute song where you could have done it in 2.5, but sometimes the narrative calls for that. Sometimes the song wants that, and you want to be able to take your time with it. So I don't know. I'll be honest. I don't think about it too much. Although I do find that I am writing shorter songs than maybe I used to. I think mostly because I tend to write lyric first, where before I used to write music first. And music I can kind of go on meander a lot, but lyric I tend to I write it and then I want to get through it fast. So the song ends up pretty short. Like the holiday song I was talking about at the top of this episode, I wrote 3 haiku poems because my wife Emma had told me, I was talking to her before the holidays about how I haven't written a holiday song in 2 years now, and I used to write one every year. And she said, well, you used to sometimes before that you were putting like a holiday haiku on Facebook. You just wrote a little haiku poem and put it on Facebook. And I'm like, you could just do a few haikus. I'm like, yeah, that's not a bad idea. So I had this idea, and then I wrote 3 little haiku poems. So the whole song, including long instrumental bits to this piece, ended up being 2.5 minutes.
Wow.
Right. And it's 3 verses.
Yeah.
Essentially. So I don't know. But even then I feel like I don't feel like it's too short. I feel like it's wanting more. And there's a difference, because there are a lot of 2.5-minute songs that are spectacular.
No, that's
true. And they pack a lot of stuff into 2.5 minutes, and you're in and you're out, and it's like brilliant. It's just this burst of energy. And sometimes the song wants that too.
Yeah.
So I just think for anyone out there who's contemplating what the length of my song is, just let it be what the song wants. Don't hopefully, nothing else can really dictate it other than that.
And also maybe be realistic about the fact it's like, your stuff, whether or not your song really will have a chance to, be on TikTok and be discovered. I mean, a good chance it won't be. So, don't I mean, I write short songs just because that's all I've always written. Those kinds, like I've always written within a fairly consistent kind of approach because it's
Hmm.
just I've always been in bands and we always kind of did stuff. And um, but yeah, maybe it's something I need to kind of relax. I mean, the Under Pressure is very. It's a wonderful song, or Under the Pressure.
Mm.
It's a wonderful song, but I'm thinking that would be a hard thing to do on your own. Like you'd
Mm.
really have to
Mm.
compose it, you
Yeah,
know,
yeah.
as
You have to
opposed
take your
to where,
time and arrange it properly and do all give that attention to detail for the whole sustained 9 minutes.
yeah, which would be tough. Like that
Yeah,
would be a
and then
real
there was another
challenge.
one I sent. Yeah, there's another one I sent you, Cold Little Heart by Michael Wanaka,
Mm.
um, which is another great song. This one was released in 2016, so not that long ago. And again, it's a 9 minute song, and again, it's the same thing all the way through in terms of like not necessarily the same chord progression, but
No,
it's the same mood. It's
yeah,
not a multi-suite thing. It's just a
mm.
build up, a gradual build up, and there is kind of a two-thirds. The first third is slightly different. It's very instrumental. It's almost instrumental at the beginning, and then the vocal comes in, and it is a slightly different thing, but it's very tightly related.
Mm.
So it is almost like it's an intro and then the song proper. But even then, the whole thing is 9 minutes long, so the song proper is still, you know, 6.5 minutes.
Wow, that's
And
cool.
it's a great song. It's a great song. I
Yeah,
really enjoyed
yeah, it is
listening
a
to
good
it
one.
the
Yeah,
whole way through. Like it's great.
yeah. No, I'd love to hear what our listeners think about song lengths and if they even worry about it. Maybe this is just my thing, you know?
Yeah, no, I think I mean, it's a question that's come up for me too. I expect something when I start, especially when I start a project, I expect it to be long or short, and then it ends up being the opposite. And I'm surprised. And
Yeah,
is that the right thing? And was it what I wanted, or is it just what the song wanted? I don't know, all those
yeah,
sorts of thoughts that go through your head, right? And yeah, I don't know. I mean, I tend to, hopefully, I tend to just put what I need to put into a song, and once I'm done, I'm done, and
yeah,
who cares how long it is?
yeah. That is
So
true.
yeah.
Yeah, who knows?
Good. All right. So the other thing I've been seeing, I've seen this a couple of times on the social media. Someone in the Facebook group mentioned something about musical math. Have you ever heard this term before, musical math?
Well, I know music is very mathematical, but that's about
Hmm.
all I know.
Mathematical. Yeah, but as a term in and of itself, I feel like I'd seen it a couple of times on socials and kind of started wondering what that meant. So I actually Googled it today. Let's just Google musical math. And it doesn't seem to be an actual thing in terms of like an actual discipline or a way of thinking about something or rather, but it's just there was one web page from like a university that I found that really talked about how, especially in terms of rhythm, you can there's whole notes, four beats, and quarter notes, and half notes,
Mm.
and quarter and 16th notes, and those are all fractions, and those are there's very much math in rhythm in terms of counting and dividing up space and all
Mm.
that sort of stuff. But the thing that surprised me there was that they didn't talk about how you can also divide pitch into a mathematical
Oh,
view. And when I hit the Wikipedia page about music, and they don't call it musical math, they just call it music and math, or music and mathematics. They have a wiki page on it, and leave it to Wikipedia. They actually go a lot deeper than you'd ever want to go because they start talking about axiomatic functions and elements
mm.
of sound and time and meter. They do talk about rhythm. They talk about frequency and harmony, and they even talk about how like there's just intonation, the math behind just intonation, which is very pure, and
All
then
right.
equal temperament gets a little imperfect, but there is math behind that too, and they go into that, and I totally didn't. It went right over my head when they start talking about the math in that thing. I was like, okay, this is. I have to talk to talk to a mathematician friend or my brother who's very mathematically minded, see what he thinks of it. But but I was saying this to the person that posted this on one of the Facebook groups. I was having a conversation with, there was actually a music teacher, and talking about how students are almost afraid to look at music as math. They want to see it as a purely
Yes.
creative,
Yeah.
intuitive thing. And I said to her, yeah, like I co-host this songwriting podcast, and often we get guests who are very conscious about the decisions they're making in their songwriting, very cerebral and almost mathematical. Like Matt Zaddy, for example, he knows the math.
Oh, oh, he does. Oh,
Man,
that's
when
for
the show's
sure.
talking about secondary dominance and
Yeah.
all this sort of stuff, he knows the math behind it. And but at the same time, none of the guests we've had on the show are a slave to the math. They don't forget about
Yeah. Yeah.
the
The art.
the artistic, cultural,
Yeah.
impact and lyrics and poetry and all those sorts of softer things. So it's sort of like I said to this person, it's sort of like you can see the human body in the same way. Sure, it can be reduced to all chemical interactions that make up the entirety of your person, but that doesn't address consciousness or creativity or the weirdness
Yeah, that's true.
that
Yeah.
emerges from those
Yeah.
chemical reactions. Like we can have all this math and reduce music to math, but what does it mean when you put these two frequencies together? What does it mean
Oh,
when you
yeah.
put those two frequencies together and you get, like when math, you can talk about the frequencies and things like that, but then you talk about consonance and dissonance, but consonance and dissonance depends on who you're asking.
That's true.
Right? You ask Philip Glass, and his definition of consonance. Phil Glass, is that the right name?
Yeah.
The atonal guy.
Yeah.
And his definition of consonance, I'm certain, is very, very different than my definition of consonance and dissonance as well. Right. So there it gets a little bit blurrier and
Oh,
not
that's true.
as rigid as math. So and this is one thing actually that I've been I mentioned my brother a minute ago. My older brother, never been a musician. I mentioned him on the show before, and he recently tried to pick up guitar, and he wasn't really succeeding at guitar. So now he's given up guitar, but he's tried piano, and he's taking piano lessons. And he keeps asking me these questions because he's very much a left brain kind of guy and wants to understand the entirety of the system of music.
Oh, right.
And I tried to explain to him, like he was like, why white keys fine, but that seems arbitrary. Like why is the major scale a major scale? And I'm trying to explain it to him, and I keep telling him that there is natural tendencies of harmonics and all this sort of stuff behind it all. But at a certain point, we decided that equal temperament is the way to go because it allows us to be more creative. And it allows us to inject our art into it. So and that's a cultural decision. That's not
true.
a mathematical, natural thing. It's very much a human construct. And and he's like, well, it's got to still be something behind it. And I'm like, well, that's it. That's the amazing thing about music is that it is the intersection between math and science and art and culture and politics and all those different spheres. Like it's a congruence of all those things. It's not just math and it's not just poetry either.
That's true.
It's both.
It's one of the few artworks that exists solely in time. Because without time, it doesn't really exist.
Yeah, so dance maybe is the other one.
Yeah, I mean, it's really the persistence of memory that makes a melody because, it's you remember the melody, like a melody is you remembering what came before and expecting what comes next. And of course, when it is different, that little sort of delight is like, oh, isn't that neat? Or, oh, that's terrible. It sounds like jazz,
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Or like we were talking about earlier, like nostalgia, like it harkens back to something you heard years ago and that's still embedded in your memory. I was talking to someone about this the other day about music tastes over the decades and stuff like that. And it's like, I'm pretty sure it's scientifically proven that whatever you fell in love with when you were 12 years old, that's it. That is stamped in your brain for the rest of your life. And
that's true.
You can like other stuff, but you will never like anything in the future quite to the same degree and to the same way that you liked it. They like the stuff that when you were 12 and you were
it's true. It's like
for the first time.
It's it kind of gets into your brain that way. Now there is a certain kind of metal called math metal or
Oh yeah.
stuff like that, and it's like very like it's just
Like it's
it's.
yeah.
I mean, it's very tight. The people who play it are very good musicians, and it's
Oh, absolutely.
because I mean, you can't play this music drunk or on any kind of anything other than possibly caffeine, because it's very precise. But
Red Bull
it's
more like.
yeah, but I mean, it's not my cup of tea. But I certainly respect
Mhm.
people who play it. But
It takes a lot of practice and a lot of precision and a lot of it's kind of insane.
yeah,
Yeah. I don't
yeah,
listen to it very much, but from what I've heard, like, holy cow, is this actually real or is this a computer? Like,
yeah, yeah. It's kind of interesting. It's pretty. It's a very admirable thing to spend your time. But
yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
So
for
I don't know.
sure.
I mean, there's lots of books on math and music and how it all the various frequencies sort of work together, and it's certainly an interesting read. It'll help you
Yeah.
understand the musical system. I don't know if it'll make you a better songwriter, but you know,
But I think it's helpful to understand these things, and at least they simmer in your brain a little bit. There's that video I keep going back to, the Andrew Wong YouTube video where he explains harmonics
yeah,
and how harmonics lead to the major scale and everything we know about music, and he just unravels this whole thing. It's like a 12-minute video, and he does a brilliant job of explaining it all with like real, he plays a bass and explains
yeah,
the frequencies going on and everything, and that really ties all this stuff together. And he even talks about that moment, that pivot between the science part of it and the culture part of it.
yeah. It's that is a great video because there's lots of great videos that are available on these kind of topics, and we'll link to those in the soul show in the show notes.
Yeah, including ones on modes. Lots of videos on modes.
Oh yes, yes, it's coming up. So people read up onto those Modi things,
Yeah. Good stuff.
not just the old Modi.
Yeah. Not just my modi, but all
You
the
actually should
modies.
do songs just completely in modes, like everything is a mode.
Everything's it's all the modi
Because
songs.
you're Neel Modi.
Exactly. You'd think I
Of
would
course,
know
why
all
didn't I
about
think of that
modes.
before? You should.
Believe me, I've thought of that before.
That's your shtick.
That's what I should think. I'm sure that'll go over really well, and everyone will notice that they're all in modes.
Of course.
Like I said, I know I've done it by accident many times, I'm sure.
Indeed. Well, I think I hear the band.
Yeah, I think that is the band. That's about all the time we have. Song Talk Radio. So Happy New Year, everybody. It's been a nice way to start out the year. And we want to hear from you. So please send us your comments, Twitter, Facebook, or Instagram at Song Talk Radio. Send us an email, feedback@songtalk.ca. Be sure to check out our YouTube channel for live performance videos and full episodes. Subscribe today to the Song Talk Radio podcast on your favorite podcast provider. And again, find links to all the products, books, and web services we mentioned on our resources page on the website. And don't forget to check out the post for this episode for a bunch of links. And wherever you are in the world, please join us via Zoom at our next monthly Song Talk meetup. It's free to join on meetup.com and free to attend. Bring a song and lyric sheet and get constructive feedback from other songwriters. Stop by songtalk.ca for the link. You can follow me at neilmodi.com. You can follow Phil
at philemery.ca.
Great. And thanks for listening, everybody. Be sure to stop by the website, songtalk.ca, to browse past shows, find out how you can be a guest. Thanks for tuning in, everyone, and keep on writing.
See you next week.